Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be answering all of your questions about yoga teacher training. So I asked you guys on Instagram what you wanted to know, and I'm gonna tell you everything you need to know about it. I feel like I'm starting this intro with like a really odd accent. Okay. I think it's back to normal. If you didn't know, I graduated from yoga teacher training this past November. And I chose to do a 10-week program. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I graduated from teacher training, and then now I actually work at the studio where I did my teacher training as a teacher. So I'm going to start by getting into your questions, but I just wanted to give you that little bit of a background. I have them here on my phone. I made a list, so I'm going to go through them. I combined some and I kind of listed them in like a chronological order that would make the most sense. So the first question that I got asked is, do you have to be good at yoga to do a teacher training program? And also, do most people do it to become a teacher, or do some people do it just for personal growth? So no, you don't necessarily have to be good. Like, what even is good at yoga to be a yoga teacher? There are so many different aspects of yoga, whether it's the physical practice or the asana or the more spiritual practice, which some people choose to get into. And you really don't have to be an expert at anything, obviously, because you're going into a teacher training program, which is designed for like being an entry-level yoga teacher. So with that being said, you obviously need to have a desire to learn, and you also need to have some level of experience. So obviously, if you've never taken yoga before, you're not going to sign up for a teacher training program, and most programs will have listed on their website what's required. I think the one that I attended was saying about like a year or two of just yoga experience. So familiarity with yoga. Like, you should probably know what downward facing dog is and a few other basic postures. And like I said, have a desire to learn. So from my background, I've been practicing yoga consistently for about, I think three or so years before I started to do a teacher training program. And I kind of went into yoga like 100%. So I went from like maybe practicing like once a month with my random friends to doing it every day. So I had been doing it every day for 3 years. And in terms of physical practice, again, it doesn't really matter, but I would consider myself more of an advanced practitioner. I can do a lot of advanced arm balances. I am pretty flexible and can do a lot of yoga postures. But I did a teacher training program, and there were a lot of people who couldn't do that, and that was totally okay, because at the end of the day, it's not really about getting the postures. It's about teaching people how to move in their bodies and to become more comfortable with their bodies and maybe get something mentally from it as well. So for example, there are a lot of people in my class who were still working on crow pose, which is a really complicated pose and can take a long time for people to master. And then there were some people who were very, very flexible and some people who weren't flexible at all. So it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, as long as you have a desire to learn. And that being said, most people, I would say, go into yoga teacher training to get a job from it because it is a little bit more expensive, but you can totally just do it for personal growth too. I know some people in my program were on the older side and already had a full-time job, and they were just doing it sort of to deepen their own practice and to learn more about the foundations of yoga that you couldn't get from like a yoga class itself. Because obviously, if you want to practice yoga, you can just go to a studio. And if you're looking for more one-on-one like alignment cues, I would personally suggest just getting one-on-one trainings with a yoga teacher, like a yoga private lesson, instead of going to a teacher training program. Because if you only have a few specific questions about a posture, it'd be a lot more cost effective just to take a few classes that way. The next questions are how to pick a program, how long is it going to be, and how much does it cost? And sorry to answer this vaguely, but it really, really varies, which is actually good because then you get to pick the program that works best for you. I've been interested in doing teacher training for a while, but honestly, it never worked with my schedule. As a student, one, I didn't really have the money to do it, and meeting on the weekends just wasn't really feasible for me at that time because I was already so busy during the work week and I needed to have some relaxation on the weekends. So typically, most yoga 200-hour programs, which is the entry-level one, are either a 10-week period where you meet a few times a week over 10 weeks, or there are intensive programs where it's a month. So some of those are more destination trainings where you might go to India or Costa Rica, just off the top of my head. And some of them are also at yoga studios. So at those, you'd meet every single day, I think for the most part, for a longer period of time, and all the information is packed at once. Obviously, you're going to do what works best for your schedule. I personally enjoyed doing a longer-ish format where I met a few times during the week, but it wasn't every day, so I still had time to digest the information on my own versus like constantly being in class and just being flooded with information. I've talked to a few other people who agree with me. With that being said, month-long programs are also a really great option. There are also some options that are extended over a longer period of time. So my fiance Dylan, he is a yoga teacher as well, and he actually did a program that was over the course of a year. So they met once a month for a really long weekend over 12 months. So there are definitely different options. Just look at local studios that are near you, or if you don't have a studio near you that you particularly enjoy, maybe you look for more of those destination. For cost of a program, I would say generally it's going to be between $2,000 and $4,000, somewhere in that range. It's going to depend on the studio. It's going to depend on who is teaching the training. If they're a really famous teacher, they're obviously going to charge more. And if it's a destination training, you might have like more things included, like lodging and meals. Most programs have payment options, so you don't have to pay it all at once up front, though if you do, you normally get a discount. You can choose to pay it monthly over a certain period of time, and some studios as well have work-study options, so you can choose to pay it monthly, and then you can also choose to volunteer at the studio, maybe work at the front desk or do some cleaning and organizing, and then you'll get an additional discount off of your training. Mine didn't have that, but they did have payment options. Finally, the most important thing I think with choosing a program is choosing one that works for you. So like I said, there are so many different realms of yoga, styles of yoga. You generally are going to be pretty familiar with yoga and want to learn more before you go into a training. So I decided to do my training at my yoga studio that I have been going to for over a year before I took the training, because I really love the teachers and I went to an informational session and I knew what I personally wanted in a training, and I asked them and they told me what was in store for the training. So some yoga teacher trainings might focus more on the physical aspects and really go deep into anatomy and go a lot more, I guess, into sort of like exercise or like the physical part of the practice. So really breaking down as many postures as possible and maybe giving you a lot of practice that way. Other programs might be more spiritually based, so they go back into the foundations of yoga. Yoga is actually like 5,000 years old, and it started mostly as meditation or a mental practice, and then the physical asana is only around 200 or 300 years old. So there are plenty of teacher trainings as well that focus a lot more on the spiritual. The one that I decided to do was sort of the middle of the road. There was definitely emphasis on the spiritual practice, which is important to me, and it's something that I practice. But if you don't want to practice that, you can still practice the physical part of yoga and find a training that's more focused on that. That being said, the person who was teaching the anatomy and the physical postures in my training was really knowledgeable, which I wanted to make sure that that was in there too. And then I also like this training because they gave us a lot of time to practice during our teacher training. So we weren't just constantly learning the whole time. It was very hands-on. We were able to ask a lot of questions. It was a smaller group size, so I didn't feel overwhelmed, I guess, with the amount of people in the room. And they gave us a lot of one-on-one time where we would practice with our fellow students and give each other feedback. So that was what was really important to me. But with that being said, something else might be really important to you. So take everything I just said, take all your experience at yoga studios, and you also want to, like, I would say, personally, I would want to meet the teacher or know something about the teacher before I went, because you're going to be stuck with them, not stuck with them, but you're going to be learning from them for 10 weeks. So you want to make sure it's someone whose learning style you like, someone whose personality you like, and someone whose perspective on yoga speaks the most to you. Okay, I answered those first two questions. I feel like those are the most common questions, but I spent a long time answering them, so I'm going to try to speed it up for the next ones. Someone asked, do you have to become certified in different types of yoga? So short answer, no, but the training that you do is going to be focused around one more specific type of yoga. So I go to a power vinyasa studio, but they also teach yin, a gentle flow, but in general, everything is vinyasa style movement. I don't have time to explain all the types of yoga, but if you want to get into that, you can just Google it. So I feel most comfortable teaching a power vinyasa flow class, but that being said, I could totally teach hatha yoga, which is more based on alignment. I could teach a gentle flow. I could teach yin yoga. I could teach more restorative yoga, which isn't exactly like yin. But for example, if you wanted to learn more Ashtanga yoga, you would go to an Ashtanga yoga school. Or if you wanted to learn Kundalini yoga, you would go to a Kundalini yoga school. Those are more specific. And there are so many yoga teacher training programs out there. Actually, before I forget, I would recommend looking for a teacher training program that is Yoga Alliance certified, because some are not. And while it's not the end of the world, I would think in terms of applying for jobs in future studios, you would want one that is certified, unless you're planning on only working at that specific studio for the rest of your life. And really, it's just kind of like going to a school. Like, it's a set of certain rules and like qualifications that training must follow so you can get the best education possible. Someone asked if you needed to learn the names for all of the poses. There are so many yoga poses, so you can't possibly learn all of the names. In my teacher training program, we focused on a certain series of postures and covered all the basic postures you would see in a yoga class. And we learned this, which is also really important to me, in both English and Sanskrit, which is sort of the original yoga language. So for example, downward facing dog is Adho Mukha Svanasana. So you don't have to learn the Sanskrit names. They kind of just gave it as an option for us, but they still exposed us to that knowledge. And personally, I prefer to practice and teach while using those names whenever possible, just because I really think it honors the tradition of the practice. And those words do carry some meaning and weight with them. But again, that's totally up to you. The next big realm is like getting hired and getting a job after yoga teacher training / how much money do you make? So I can only speak from my personal perspective. For me, I really did luck out, and I wanted to do yoga teacher training, honestly, mostly for personal growth. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I liked the idea of maybe teaching once a week, which is what I do now, but I didn't want it to become my full-time job. The studio that I did my training at did approach me, and they first asked me to be on their sub list. So I wasn't a teacher on the actual schedule, but I would substitute for teachers if they were on vacation or were sick and couldn't make it in. So that's how I started working at my studio. But if you don't get a job offer or an offer to be on a sub list right away, I would suggest making yourself a resume first, and then going around to all of the local studios in your area and just submitting your resume. Most likely you're going to start, because you're a new teacher, it will be harder to get a job at first because you need experience. So you'll probably start on the sub list, and then maybe you'll get one class and then work up from there. I would just suggest get as much practice as you can. Practice with your friends, just practice with yourself, practice with your dogs, like whatever. The more you practice speaking in front of people and the flow of a class, the better you're going to be at it, and the more advanced you're going to be, like right out the gate. So once you do land a job again, like, yoga teachers aren't really in it for the money. So most people sort of do it as a supplemental income. They have another main job and they teach yoga on the side. There are a few people who I know who yoga is their primary job, and then they have some other sort of job on the side to sort of supplement the yoga. And they obviously teach more yoga classes a week. For me, I already have a full-time job. You're watching part of it. It's like my YouTube channel, my recipe blog, and everything. And I just love yoga. It's dramatically changed my life, and I wanted to become a yoga teacher to know the practice more and to maybe one day help other people know themselves and the practice more as well. I only do it once a week. I don't make very much money at all. The nice thing is I get a free membership to the studio, and the amount you get paid is really going to depend on the studio, so I can't say. I'd say generally it's somewhere between the like $25 to $35 range, and a lot of studios will do it where there's a base rate, and then if additional people come to your class, you get some sort of bonus. It really does depend on the studio though, but as you can see, like, you're only getting paid $20 to $30 for a 1 hour class, but a lot of planning goes into that class as well. So you're probably going to spend at least an hour planning your class before you teach. I wouldn't recommend teaching on the fly. I don't personally teach on the fly. I like to plan the class beforehand. I'll practice it myself, actually practice teach Dylan, and then I go teach the class. Maybe one day I'll get comfortable enough, and I think I will, once I get more experience, where I can plan the class to teach it to myself and then teach it to people, and I'll know generally timing-wise what things work and what things are going to work in everyone's bodies. But for now, as a newer teacher, I definitely like to practice it more than some of the other experienced teachers. So with all that being said, I don't think, like, if you want to make money being a fitness instructor, don't become a yoga teacher, because yoga is so much more than that. Just become like a SoulCycle instructor or something. Like, they make so much more money. But if you're really in it because you love yoga and you want to have the opportunity to change people's lives in not only a physical way, then I would suggest looking into it. But know that you're going to start out slow, and eventually you can gain more classes and make more of an income that way. The biggest way to make an income as a yoga teacher would be to host retreats, to host yoga teacher trainings, or to work online in some capacities. There are a lot of people who have apps or online yoga classes that they sell to people. And if you're your own boss, obviously you're going to make more of the profit so you would make more money that way. I got into teacher training because I wanted the in-person connection with people in the studio. I might film classes online in the future, but I'm not too concerned about it right now. Someone asked what the most challenging part of teacher training was. For me, I definitely come at it from a different angle, I guess, because I went to graduate school for physical therapy and I took a human anatomy lab, so I already know a lot about the muscles, how they function, and it's very easy for me to visualize, like if I'm in a posture, what muscles in my body are working or what I need to do in order to get into a more advanced posture. So I think that might be the most challenging aspect for some people. And then also I come from a pretty consistent yoga background, and I have gone to a lot of yoga classes. My Sanskrit was already pretty good, so I did have a lot of knowledge about yoga before going into the training. So for me personally, I think that the most challenging thing was just the time commitment, because it was like my weekends and some of my weeknights for a whole 10-week period. That being said, I wouldn't change anything about it for the world. I think that it really is going to depend, the most challenging thing, on where you're at in your practice and what you're hoping to get out of the teacher training as well. Another person asked if teaching yoga was more fulfilling than practicing it. I don't really know the answer to that question. I would say it's very different. So when I practice yoga, I practice it for me, for my own self-discovery, to get in tune with my body and sort of connect with myself, and it's like a moving meditation, if you will. But when I teach yoga, I don't really teach it for myself, I teach it for other people. So your job as a yoga teacher isn't to do the flow with your students and show how awesome you are and how you can do the splits and you can do a headstand or whatever. Your job as a yoga teacher is to hold space for everyone and make everyone else's experiences, number one, safe, and then fulfilling. So you want people to get what you get out of yoga when you practice it in another studio's class. So some days that might mean making a really challenging class because you have a room of advanced yogis. Some other days that might mean reading a room and knowing that you have a lot of beginners and sort of taking a step back from the flow you had planned and adding more modifications so they will feel comfortable with yoga and not overwhelmed and never want to come back to the studio again. I like teaching because it allows me to serve others and share my practice with other people. But I would say in terms of fulfillment, it's very different than practicing by myself, but I enjoy both of them. The final question that I'm going to end on is, how has my own practice grown through training? So honestly, that was my biggest goal when I started teacher training. I'm thankful that I get to teach and I do really enjoy it. Because I work from home all day, it's just really nice to like go somewhere and get to interact with people and see people get so excited when they're able to do something that they weren't before or discover new things about their bodies. I think my personal practice through teacher training grew a lot because even though I did have a strong anatomy knowledge and I knew how to do a lot of yoga poses, it was really nice to revisit the anatomy, because in a class your teacher's going to give a few cues on alignment, but they're not going to give it like the whole complete picture at once. But in my training, we went over each pose and how to properly be in the pose and some like deviations you might see when people are tight or weak in certain areas. So that was really beneficial for me. But I think the most that I got out of it was honestly in terms of personal growth, because we did touch a lot on the spiritual side of yoga or just getting to know yourself. And that was what I was really looking for in a teacher training program. And I feel like I learned a lot more about the roots of yoga and just how I can use yoga, not only when I'm on my mat, but when I'm off of my mat, to work on myself and to work on my interactions with other people in the everyday world and spread more love and kindness and gratitude. And at the end of the day, yoga means union or joining people together. And that, I think, is what it's really all about, like discovering your light and sharing it with other people. So that's why I like being a yoga teacher, and that's why I practice yoga. So I think that answers all the basic questions for now. I don't want to make this one too long or overwhelming. Let me know in the comments below if maybe you have more of a general yoga Q&A questions that you would like to ask me. I could do a Q&A on that. I wanted to focus this one exclusively on teacher training. I'm becoming a teacher and things related to teaching. If you have more specific questions, I could do another one on that too. But that's it for now. If you're having an awesome day, and continue to have one. And thanks for watching. I hope I see you soon virtually. All right, bye.